Nu pratar vi lite engelska istället. As you will have realized towards the end of the day today, this world of sheet metal is a rather complicated world. There are there are innovations popping up all over the world all the time, and it's absolutely impossible as an architect to keep track of all these innovations. So that's when you call our next speaker. He's worked with the lot. He's worked with Hadid, he's worked with Renzo Piano, he's worked with Jean Nouvel, he's worked with E.M. Pei, he's worked with Toyo Ito, and on and on and on it goes. Started off as a product designer, but over the past 30 years, he's become one of the world's foremost experts on innovative facades. So who are you going to call? Greg Romine. Welcome.
Thank you. That's quite flattering. Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. A little explanation about facade consultants. We have an opportunity to collaborate, as Mark said, with a broad spectrum of professionals. And it's humbling, flattering, exciting, and every architect has a different dynamic. So we learn every day about the architectural process and about facades. What I'd like to touch on today principally is the inspiration behind facades. How do they come about? Many people, of course not in the architectural profession, they see a facade and it just magically appears, but the blood, sweat, and tears that go into facades and the inspiration is a remarkable journey, and it happens on almost every project. One thing to touch on, to just give you a little perspective about my angle, is that when I founded the firm, I really wanted to do just cultural buildings, cultural and institutional buildings, scalable buildings, which proved to be a really stupid idea, because if you do a smaller institutional project for a client and then they ask you to do a larger project, you just say, no, we don't want to do that. It's kind of a strange business concept. So inspired facades. Oh, really? So the first project is the Shanghai Korean Pavilion. Designed by Min-Suk Cho Mass Studies, and Min-Suk spent time at OMA in Rotterdam, New York, and then moved back to his native Seoul, Korea. So the inspiration for this project was the Hangul or Korean alphabet. So how do we transpose that to a facade? We looked at a lot of different materials. Ultimately, we wanted to go with a plate aluminum. It ended up being a composite aluminum because of a double-sided finish. But the idea was to make the structure very transparent, so you can see people inside, you can see structures. So one of the things about metal facades that we're quite excited about is the use of the tension concept, whereas the spanning members are all in tension, so you don't see the massing of these spanning members. So it is a solid material that becomes somewhat transparent. So you can see the dramatic effect and how minimal the structure is behind the material. Also part of the building is these colored materials, which we used a digital technology to actually print on a PVDF-coated aluminum sheet. Keep in mind this project only has a lifespan of 7 months, so ultimately the digital material has an effective lifespan of 2 years. It starts to break down under ultraviolet. So you can see the tension facade and how open a solid material can be. And what happened was when we did this study of the facade, the scale was very difficult because it's such a complex visual effect. I would encourage, as most architects require, is to do a lot of visual mock-ups, because the first visual mock-up of this project, the scale was a little off. So through that process, it was adjusted. Next project is the Museum of American Folk Art. Now, it's not a plate material, it's actually a cast material, but we are now exploring the use of plate material in a similar way, so I wanted to show the project. The inspiration for the project is to be handcrafted. It's now, this building was just acquired by the Museum of American Folk, or the Museum of Modern Art right next door. But the idea was that it be handcrafted. So it's a platen cast, meaning that the material, this happens to be white bronze, is poured on concrete or steel platens, and that's why you get this, this effect. And then behind that is a 316 stainless steel. So what happened the first, I happened to be there with Billy Chen, one of the partners in the firm. We were across the street, and they took off the barricades, and what happened was people started walking up to the building immediately and touching the building. Passerbys would walk by and touch it. And Billy's comment was, it's exactly what we wanted, because if you touch a building, you're likely at some point not to walk by it, but to go in the building. So the idea of using a plate material, so now what we're doing is we're taking very simple plate material, in this case aluminum sheet, and we're hot working, meaning we're applying temperature and then we're hydraulically pressing in a random pattern. In this case, it was just crushed rock. So it gives it a very interesting and organic appearance. So normally you would think of a plate material being a very tight and monolithic surface, whereas this can be a very random surface. This happens to have a blue industrial dye on it, which gives it the blue tint. This project is Uniqlo. Uniqlo is one of the fastest growing apparel retailers in the world. It's a Japanese company. The architect is Bolin Solinsky Jackson. They have quite a broad spectrum of projects, but they're well known for their Apple flagship stores. So this is the largest flagship store for Uniqlo in the world, in Shanghai. It's in Nanjing Shilu, which is one of the most expensive shopping streets in the world, in the sense of the amount of cost for lease and the competition to be noticed. And BCJ, Bolin Solinsky Jackson, chose a more subtle route to stand out among all of the flash of all these other stores. So we went through a study of how could we create this fabric-looking facade on this building in the middle of a large shopping district. So apparel, fabric. So what we used is we used plate aluminum, and we used we milled the aluminum instead of using a punching process, so the aluminum would stay very flat. One of the interesting things that I talked about with Mark is the use of nanotechnology in coatings. So this particular coating, Shanghai is extremely polluted, has a lot of soiling of facades. So the paint finish of this material is actually a ceramic composite coating. So it's very slippery, and it also reflects sunlight, or in this case sunlight, and also reflects the light inside the cavity of the wall. This is a project in Istanbul. It's on the Asian side. It's considered to be a gateway building. The architect is FX Fowl in New York. So the idea of the building was to take cues from the history of Istanbul, which is quite rich. Part of the architecture in Istanbul does not focus on human forms or curvilinear forms, but focuses on geometric forms because of cultural aspects. It also, gold played an important part in trading and in the culture of Istanbul. The skyline, of course, is dotted with minarets. And in, I don't remember the region, but there is a region in Turkey that has some very interesting rock formations. So these were all inspirational points for the facade and the shape of the building. So it's essentially this shard-shaped material, or massing, and this color, the scrim, if you will, is a variable light, or light interference coated stainless steel. So it provides intermittent shading. So this is one of the materials. So we're using 3 different colors of light interference coated stainless steel, and we're using electrochemical process because we want the design team wants to see the organic nature of the stainless steel. And it's okay if it's slightly variable. It doesn't need to be perfect, perfectly matched, if you will. So a couple of aspects. The variable perforation also makes the material more rigid, so we can use a thinner material and impose more structure to it by its variable perforation.